and I'm going to probably ruffle some feathers by saying this, but I hate the word pitch.
I hate the word pitch too.
I hate the word pitch because it implies exactly what we don't want to do, which is a one-way conversation.
It's a trigger word for me.
It is. I hate the word so much.
I had somebody say to me the other day, we'd like our people to be more consultative. So when they're given their pitch, I'm like, what did you just say?
So we gave them a pitch deck so they could be more consultative.
Yeah. Welcome to Building Your Sales Engine. I'm your host, Mark McGraw. Hey friends, welcome back to Building Your Sales Engine. It's Mark McGraw. Hey, in today's episode, I sit down with Emily Jeppes and we talk about really the theory versus the reality of training and selling and being in the moment. And what we mean by that and what we talk about are, we can talk about the theory of, for example, you should always get to the decision maker, but the reality is sometimes something different. And we go through 4 different scenarios and situations that we find ourselves in where theory sometimes meets reality, and you have to adapt and shift and change. And so be on the lookout in this episode for how do you become comfortable being in the moment, making things conversational in sales, and being able to deal with the reality of the situation, which may be different than what we're taught or trained to do. And how do you adapt and shift in that? So I frankly learned a lot in the conversation and made me think of a lot of things. I think it will for you too. As always, if you want to go grab some handouts and downloads and other information, go to buildingyoursalesengine.com/giveaway. And over there, you can go get other resources from us. Let's dive into the conversation with Emily Jeppes. Hey everybody, it's Mark McGraw, and I'm here again with Emily Jeppes with a J, even though it's spelled with a Y.
That's right.
Emily, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Indeed, indeed. Welcome back to the show, Building Your Sales Engine. Glad you're here.
Me too. Always fun.
Always fun. Hey, we're going to talk today about a topic that I think is kind of a cool topic, and that is theory versus reality. Mm-hmm. And so we were talking about this prior to us recording this episode. Mm-hmm. Why don't you, if you want, give us a shot of what you see as the theory of either sales training or the concepts of what we coach and train versus the reality. And let's talk about how we marry the two together.
Mm-hmm. I love this topic because I think that understanding the difference between theory and reality and how to pivot when things don't go as planned is really what separates good salespeople from great salespeople. And I don't know if you've ever watched or if your listeners have ever watched the show Nailed It on Netflix.
I have not.
You've not watched it, so I'll tell you what you should watch it, but I'll tell you what you need to know. It's a baking show, but they're not professional bakers. So they are given an exact finished cake that is exactly what it's supposed to look like. They have an example, okay? They're given the recipe in detail, and they are given all of the professional equipment to make all of the materials, ingredients, equipment they need to make this beautiful cake. And they take these 3 non-professional bakers and they say, go recreate this cake. And the things that people come up with are absolutely horrifying, hilarious and horrifying.
This is like a Pinterest fail.
Yes, exactly. It's Pinterest fail in a Netflix show. And I had this epiphany at some point because my daughter, who's 8, loves the show. We've seen every episode, many of them multiple times. But I had this epiphany that this is exactly what happens in sales orgs everywhere all the time. We give a salesperson, this is our sales process. This is our sales playbook. For example, you have a first meeting, you identify your champion, then you go get a meeting with the ultimate decision maker. That's the playbook. Right? Now, in reality, that doesn't always happen, right? So this type of thing is happening all the time. And what's so striking is that, let's take the Nailed It example again. Professional bakers are making so many decisions along the way based on experience and skill that are not going to show up in the recipe. They're not going to show up in your playbook, for example. Yeah. Right? So, for example, if they're baking at higher altitudes, they know that changes the way that things come out, and they're making adjustments along the way. If it says that something needs to bake for 20 minutes, but they take a look at it and it's like ready to come out at 18, they know that it's time to pull it, even if the recipe says 20 minutes. If the mixture says a cup of milk, but it looks a little too dry to them, they will add a little bit more to get it exact, because they know where they need to go. And really good salespeople they know the theory. They know that they need to get to the ultimate decision maker. But when they can't, or when things don't go as planned, they have a plan B. They know how to make adjustments. They know how to add a little more moisture to the mix. And that is really what separates the good from the great, in my opinion.
I couldn't agree more. I love and by the way, you'll get me right. Is it a metaphor or an analogy? Because we've laughed about this before.
Right?
That I always
I'm afraid to answer because I'll get it wrong.
Okay, well, we'll look it up.
Yeah.
But it's a great example. We'll go with that. That's
example.
Generic enough. It's a great example or comparison for what goes on in the real world. We can role play and demo things in coaching and training, which it's the right and good thing to do. In the world, in reality, sometimes things look different. And I was thinking of a few different circumstances or situations that show up. Do any come to your mind? I'll throw a couple of them out.
Yeah.
Where we do have an idea of what this moment should look like in a sales call, but the reality can sometimes look different. Any come to your mind, or I'll throw some out?
There's two that stand out to me as really common. It really doesn't matter the industry. We run into this with sales teams all the time. One is we're taught based on sales theory. It doesn't matter if it's Sandler or any other methodology, right? Do not give any pricing until you've had a thorough discovery conversation.
Yeah.
And in theory, and even in practice, that is a very good rule to follow. There are situations where we have buyers who will not continue with the conversation and they will ask us 3 times in a row, I don't want to waste your time.
Yeah.
How much does this cost before we go any further?
Yeah.
Right? So we have to predict that, and we have to know how to handle it.
Yeah.
Right? The other scenario would be always get to the quote ultimate decision maker. So theory would tell you I have a discovery call, and the next thing that I do is I get myself to that ultimate decision maker. That is a good place to start. That's the thing about theory. It exists. It's good for a reason. That is going to be my first shot. But if for some reason that's not possible, and I tried it and my theory part failed, I need to know what other options do I have? Because fortunately, I think this is a great thing about sales. Well, I think I'm biased. I think it's the best profession in the world. One of the great things about sales is that it's never about perfection.
Yeah.
We have to outrun the competition, but not the bear, right? We just have to be better than our competition to win the deal.
And so those are a couple of great examples. So we got pricing there. We've got always get to the ultimate decision maker. Again, we're going to unpack some of these things and go into detail. Two that come to my mind is, we teach a concept called an upfront contract, which is basically how to set expectations at the beginning of a meeting. There's a theory to upfront contracts, and then there's the reality of an upfront contract. And I think we could explore that. Another big one that I see is demos and presentations. There's a theory of what a seller thinks a demo and presentation should look like, and then you and I know what the reality should look like. So let's, for sake of the sales process, let's pick up on the upfront contract.
Yeah.
Let's start there, because that's kind of usually the start of a meeting. Anything you see on that side that's theory versus reality? How do we shape the beginning of a meeting so that it's practical and natural and conversational?
Well, whenever we're learning something for the first time, so let's say we just learned upfront contract in our first time we learned it in a class or somewhere else, we have to start with the theory. We have to learn it in the quote textbook way as our starting point, right? We need to understand all the elements and why they're there. But in reality, when we show up in front of a prospect, we have to make some decisions about the personality style that's in front of us, the nature and the purpose of this particular meeting. And it may mean that we take this originally, very what feels like a long, could be a monologue if not done well, upfront contract, and I've condensed it into a couple of sentences.
Yeah.
and I've accomplished the same goal, but I've been smart about how I used that tool.
Yeah.
Is it exactly the theory textbook example of an upfront contract? No. Did I accomplish the goal and get it done? Yes, in the right context. So an example of that would be when we're teaching upfront contract, we cover the various elements, and it could sound like, hey, Mark, today, I think that we had 45 minutes set aside. Is that still what you have? Any hard stops?
No.
Okay. The purpose of today's meeting is we're going, so
That's
like,
painful.
That's painful, right? Whereas as I get more skilled, I might say, hey, Mark, I think our conversation today is really about trying to figure out, is there a reason for us to have a second conversation? Is that fair?
Yeah. Even your tonality is different. It's not robotic. That's a big difference in the example of what you just gave.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have to learn the theory. That is my starting point. And then I can begin to make it mine and adapt it to the reality of the situation that I am faced with.
And part of how you just did that right there was the fact that, the volume of your voice is lower. Mm-hmm. You're asking a question and you're waiting for a response.
Yeah.
There's interaction. It's not a monologue.
Yeah.
By the way, the other day I was coaching and training upfront contracts, and I had a guy time me for how long my relatively good upfront contract was that I did as a demo. And it's funny, we kind of joked, we'd spent like 25 minutes talking about the concept and the elements and all these. It took 2 minutes and 4 seconds to do an upfront contract with the person and make it conversational and back and forth.
Right.
So it just kind of goes to show that that it doesn't have to take a long time when you go through it. So other thoughts that you have around, making upfront contracts conversational as opposed to your point, we're here for 30 minutes. Any questions you have for me? Here's what I want to cover for you. At the end of our meeting, we will. Right. What are the thoughts?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is, if you are new to upfront contracts, you must get the words out, not in front of your prospect, many times before you show up in front of them.
Practice in the car.
Practice in the car, practice in your office, practice with your colleague. Because if you're trying to remember all of the elements or think of it as a script, it's going to come out like a robotic script in front of the prospect. And one of our rules is never practice in front of the prospect, right? So if it is a new technique for you, you have to get the words out enough until it becomes like you can deliver it confidently and conversationally, right? Mm-hmm. So that's probably one of the biggest things. The other is making sure that I treat it as a dialogue and not a monologue.
Big one.
Yeah. It's not, all right, now we're getting started and I've got this thing I've got to get through and I've got to cover all of these elements. No, I'm pausing to say, is that fair with you? What do you want to add to the agenda today to make sure this was a good use of your time? I'm getting their feedback. I'm pausing. I'm asking them to contribute with me.
With intention and meaning that you actually do have an interest in what their input is.
Right. It's not
that you're doing it to check the box to say, I asked you if there was anything.
Exactly. So. And as we grow and evolve as salespeople, there are situations where we may sometimes break the rules of an upfront contract, but we did it with intention in that particular moment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so, I think, to your point is it's done on purpose.
Yes.
I know for me, I've had many situations where as I've gone back and either watched myself run a sales call, which you and I we both sell.
Yes.
And so everybody should know that as well, where I've gone back and watched myself. And my upfront contract did not take place until minute 23. Yeah. And it was actually probably not even minute 23. It was spread out over the first 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Because that just made it conversational. And the other person said some stuff and you're back and forth.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
There's a story, if you don't mind me sharing real quick, that I've heard Dave Mattson talk about with David Sandler. And the story goes is that David Sandler is the founder of the Sandler selling system. He's passed away many years ago. David Mattson was at this time a sales guy. He's riding in the car with David Mattson. They went to a sales call. They're leaving the sales call, and Dave Mattson is very, very quiet. And Sandler's like, "What's the problem?" And eventually Sandler gets him to tell, and Mattson says, "Fraud. Fraud. You've been telling me all this stuff, and then we just had this meeting, and I didn't see any of it. I mean, where was?" And Mattson tells the story. He says, Sandler pulled over on the side of the road. They stopped on the side of the road, pulled off, stopped the car. And Sandler said, "Did we have bonding with the customer?" Dave's like, "Yeah." "Did we talk about how long the meeting should be?" Mattson starts to get a little smaller. "Yeah." "Did we talk about the outcomes that we were going to have from today and things like what their major issues were, what it was costing them, what the impacts were? Did we talk about," and Dave said, "I just kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller in this."
Yeah.
And what his point was, Mattson's point to me was, is that done right, you're following all of the concepts, but sometimes you can't even see them.
Yeah.
And this is Dave Mattson, who teaches this stuff at the foot of the master, Dave Sandler, who created it. And he couldn't see Sandler doing it in the meeting. And, and that's theory versus reality as an example right there. So,
you know, there's a Japanese concept that I learned on a fashion podcast of all things called Shuhari.
Okay.
And I love it because it's such a beautiful example of what you just described. And it describes the evolution of really mastering a skill. So Shu is where I am following the rules exactly as they are written. So when I am learning how to do upfront contracts in a sales call, there's going to be a period of time where I have not yet earned the right to go rogue, right? I am going to follow the textbook upfront contract rules and format. Ha is where I am starting to become more natural at it. I am starting to kind of make it my own, but I'm still following all of the rules, right? Re, which is the final phase of evolution, is where I'm breaking the rules, but only because I have now developed enough experience that I know how to break the rules and still accomplish the right goal. I can really make it my own. I can put my own spin on things, and I've earned that right because I have the context and the experience now that I can do it that way and still be effective.
Love it. I love it. And so give me once again, what's the whole word for it?
Shuhari.
Shuhari. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I learned it about fashion, actually. So the podcast and the fashion podcast was talking about how the same rules apply for people who are, replicating trends. So they'll, there's, if everybody's wearing high-waisted jeans, for example, that's kind of the shoe, right? And then if you see really highly fashionable people who are really kind of leading the change, they're following some of the rules, but they're breaking some of the rules too. But it's very intentional.
But they know the rules well enough that they're not going to look silly.
Exactly.
On the other end.
Exactly.
The Sandler rule that I've used for this is know the rules so well you know when to break them.
Ah, yes.
That's really a good way of thinking of it. So one of the situations we just talked about was at the beginning of meeting and upfront contracts. Another one's going to be around pricing. So again, theory versus reality. The theory is that you always establish value before price. It doesn't always work that way in the real world, and we've got to adapt. So talk a minute about that one, and how do we turn the theory of never disclose a price until you have value into the reality of what we got to do in the real world?
Yeah, so such a good example, because a tenet of selling based on value is that we've got to develop value so that the price makes sense in context.
Yeah.
Right? Very core tenet. And where we see this break down is we do sometimes encounter buyers who push us right out of the gate I want to know how much this cost. I don't even want to continue the conversation until I have an understanding of whether or not this is even reasonable. And salespeople, sometimes we just cave because we don't know what else to do, even if we know that that's not in our best interest or theirs. We know what we should do, but maybe we lack the technique on how to handle it instead.
Yeah.
Right. So in those situations, plan A theory would be that maybe I gently push back on them to say, happy to have a conversation about that. I know that pricing is important. At this moment in time, I don't know enough about your situation to give you anything that would even be reasonable or remotely accurate. So can we talk about what's going on with your organization so that I can get you some idea about pricing? Like plan A is that I'm going to push back on them.
By the way,
right?
I have to interrupt you and have a moment with you about that. If you were to ask me the same situation, I probably would have used the exact same words. That's having a system. A system gives you an outline. It's not necessarily a script, but in this case, we would have used
a talk track.
Probably a talk track, almost the exact same words as our system for plan A, because you and I both follow the Sandler system. And it doesn't mean that there's not another way to have that plan A.
Sure.
But I just laughed at what you just said because those are exactly exactly the same words that I would use.
Yes. And it is our duty as professional sellers to know what our plan A is, to have that talk track ready to go, because I know I'm going to run into buyers who do that, who push me for pricing right out of the gate, and I know exactly what I need to do.
Yeah.
It's also my duty as a professional seller to know if they go, I get that, I understand that, but can you give me a ballpark? Because I really don't even know if this is feasible for us.
Is this $1 million or $50?
Right, exactly. So I understand why that happens. And it's not always because we have a buyer who's a suspect and not a prospect. I mean, sometimes genuinely that is their honest truth in that moment. So if I get asked again, I go to my plan B. Hey, happy to talk about that, right? I could share with you what other organizations have spent who are about your size with the number of salespeople that you have. I don't know how helpful that would be because there's no scope within that context. Yeah. Would you like to talk about scopes so that we can get to that in our conversation today? Right? I'm going to push back on them again.
Yeah.
If they ask me again, or maybe I've made the decision in that moment to go ahead with my plan C, that's okay too. I'm going to give them a bracket that is so big that they cannot use it as a check quote with the incumbent or the competition. But it's an accurate range that shows that I'm not scared of talking about price. I'm not trying to be evasive. Of course, buyers hate that, right? Mm-hmm. But also demonstrates that the range is genuinely so big that unless we keep talking, I can't narrow it down for you.
It's not helpful in a good way for both buyer and seller.
Exactly. So if, for example, I work with a client who sells custom software. Well, truly custom software, as you can imagine, the range of what you might invest is absolutely enormous, and the sky's the limit.
Yeah.
Right. But there is a minimum. Right. So what we see is if somebody has never purchased custom software before, they genuinely may say, what are we talking about? Because I don't want to get too far into this and realize that we can't do it. Right. Well, there is real value if that is the situation to say, the least that you might spend with context, the least that you might spend for a very, very simple application, it might be somewhere around $10,000. And again, that is a very simple application. For more complex things, like, so for example, if we're working with a manufacturer to work on, automating how some of their data is pulled, and there's a lot of moving parts. I mean, we've worked on projects 300,000 or more. So I know that's a big range, but at this moment in time, I don't know how complex your need is. What that allows us to do is if our buyer had an expectation that it might cost them $5,000 for this simple application, we need to have a conversation right out of the gate.
Nobody's wasting our time.
Right.
We're not wasting our time as the seller.
Right. And we're not being evasive, and we're being honest, and we're being accurate, and we're participating with that buyer in a conversation that they need to have in order to continue the conversation with us.
So if we go back to even core Sandler methodology, which is, you bonding and rapport, upfront contracts, paying budget decision. If you just think of those core elements, one thing we got to remember is that you can't lose bonding with someone. Is if you lose bonding at that first stage, now there's no trust at all. So if they think the buyer thinks you're being manipulative or you're going to change the pricing based upon how much information you find, if those things occur and we've lost trust and credibility, everything else from there on falls apart.
Right. Exactly.
And so it's so critical that we are respectful, that we put it in the right time, and at the same time, if we're gonna threaten rapport, then it might be that we need to play the card and say something like you just said in terms of brackets. Or the other alternative is that if you're picking up that this person really is not a genuine buyer, cease and desist. Call it, move on. That's also a good move.
Yeah.
The third area that we just chatted about where people maybe fall short between theory and reality, and I'll start this one if this is okay.
Go for
it. I'm super passionate about this.
Yeah.
one. And that is demos and presentations and PowerPoints and all of this. And here's what I see on this. I think people have been spoiled by, I'll just go on and say it, Shark Tank. Because I think when people go do presentations in the sales world, whether it's B2B or B2C, they've seen things like Shark Tank, and they've seen people do presentations, and they think that that what should happen is I roll up, I plug in my laptop, I get the room in front of me, I start on slide 1. I go to the end, to the thank you slide. I go through all the stuff. I've rehearsed all of my slides. I know what I'm going to say. I've got all my presentation down. And at the end, the entire room is going to rise up in a thunderous applause and throw money at them. That's the theory of what we think should happen.
Yes.
The reality looks extremely, extremely different.
If you're doing it well.
If you're doing it well.
Yes.
So we're probably thinking the same thing, but what would you say some of the reality should look like? What should the reality look like in a demo, software demo, product demo, presentation? What should it look like?
Oh gosh, yes. I'll just say right out of the gate, and I'm going to probably ruffle some feathers by saying this, but I hate the word pitch.
I hate the word pitch too.
I hate the word pitch because it implies exactly what we don't want to do, which is a one-way conversation.
It's a trigger word for me.
It is. I hate the word so much.
I had somebody say to me the other day, we'd like our people to be more consultative. So when they're given their pitch, I'm like, what did you just say?
So we gave them a pitch deck so they could be more consultative.
Yeah. I mean, please continue, but it's a trigger word. I'm untriggered now. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So a lot of things need to happen in order for this to go well. And some of those things happen before we ever show up for that demo. We have to set really good expectations with everybody going into that meeting.
Great point.
That this is not a pitch.
Yeah.
Right.
Because the buyer expects the seller to come in and plug in the laptop. Let's go. Where do you present?
Because everyone who came before them selling anything, that's exactly what they did.
Yeah.
So if we don't give them fair warning that that's not what's happening here, then they will expect it.
Yeah.
Right. So we've got to get their buy-in. Here's how it's going to go. We want to demo the software. We want to demo the things that we think are going to be relevant to you. So we need to have a conversation about what's relevant to you so that we only show you those pieces when we get to the demo. Yeah. Right.
Otherwise, we're wasting your time.
Exactly. Right. So we've got to have that conversation ahead of time. We also have to, before we get into that meeting, understand who's going to be there and what they care about. Yeah. So that as we're framing that demo or that presentation, we have a sense of what we need to deliver. Now, really good opportunity here, a little spin-off of theory versus reality. In theory, we know what all the people in the room want to see. In reality, we don't always have access to them, nor do we know who's going to be there until the day that we show up.
Yeah.
Right? So, side note, there's a whole theory and reality unpacking to happen there. But when we get into that meeting, we've got to position it as, I'm going to walk through, let's say, some of the use cases that came up in our conversations prior. And I'm going to talk about those. And I'm going to pause. I'm going to decide ahead of time, when are my natural stopping points, so that I can pause and say, does this seem like it would fit your world? Does it fit your environment? What challenges do you see? Any deal breakers that you see? And I've intentionally got stopping points that me and everybody on my team knows we're stopping there to get buy-in. And then we make sure we don't have any issues. And we talk about what we need to talk about. And we move on to the next chunk.
And that's a different experience for the buyer than somebody just going through. And it's almost like in some cases, I've thought to myself, what this seller is doing right now, you don't even need this seller. You need a pre-recorded video that you're going to play in front of the buyer. And that's not what the buyer's experience really should be. It should be interactive, engaging. I'll share this quick example that I ran into. A number of years ago, we did a study with a client where they were doing lunch and learns. They're an engineering firm, and their job was to go do a lunch and learn for another engineering firm and look for projects that they then could sell to the other engineering firm. But it was under the context of a lunch and learn, and they were, of course, being educational. But the outcome was to identify projects. So the course of the year, we did all of these tracking tags on these presentations, and there were hundreds that they did. What we discovered is that when they got to the thank you slide, if the presenter got to the thank you slide, which was the last slide, they were 0 for 77 in uncovering new opportunities.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Now think about that.
That makes sense.
0 for 77 if they finished the presentation. So what our goal became with the client is to never finish the presentation. That was the goal. Okay. Because the seller's coming in thinking, I got 25 slides. I got to get to the end, and I only have 25 minutes. So it's 1 minute per slide. And the reality is it needs to look very, very different than that. Cool.
Very, very cool.
Last one we talked about was always get to the decision maker. And again, that's a good theory versus reality. Can't always happen. Unpack that one for us.
Yeah. And again, the tenet of any consultative selling approach is you've got to access power. You've got to access the, quote, ultimate decision maker. And I put them in quotes because in 2025, really what we see is there's often not one single ultimate decision maker in B2B selling. I mean, sometimes there is, but a lot of times there isn't.
In theory, there is. In reality, there is not.
Exactly. Right. Or the ultimate decision maker is the only person who can sign the contract, but they're not actually having conversations about what they're buying with most of the people that they're buying from. It's the people downstream who are making the decisions, right? So I think even from a theory perspective, as a profession, in the sales training industry, we need to rethink exactly how we frame that for the future. But that's an aside. What we see is salespeople get so intent on, I've got to get to this ultimate decision maker, that if they can't access them for some reason or another, that we see them lost. Like, I don't know what to do from here. And I see sales leaders as well saying, well, you didn't get to power. You didn't get to power. You need to get to power. And putting this pressure on them to do so, when maybe that's actually not the reality of how decisions are made in this organization, right? So we think about, at Sandler, we think about decision discovery as understanding how those decisions are made. And that is different for every organization and for everything that they're buying. Sometimes that requires us to get to the ultimate decision maker, and sometimes doesn't. So our job instead is to figure out who are all of the various people who can say no, but can't necessarily say yes. What do they think about this conversation that we've been having, this possible purchase, and then begin to influence as much as we can on those. So I've got to know what the theory is, because obviously if I have an opportunity, if it is reasonable for this prospect organization that I can get to the ultimate decision maker, that is my starting point. I'm going to do that, right? But if I can't, then my plan B might be to what we sometimes call thread the needle, or coaching up a champion, where I've got to coach my champion on how they influence the ultimate decision maker.
Yeah.
And sometimes I have a champion who's willing to do that. And sometimes I have a champion who's not willing to do that. Right. So I've got to have.
You could argue they're not a champion.
Exactly. Well, that's exactly right. The definition of champion is that they're willing to put their political capital on the line to go fight for you. So we find out they're more of a coach. They'll tell us what's going on, but they're not willing to put their political capital on the line. So I'm steadily working through, can I thread the needle here? Can I influence the ultimate decision maker through the contacts that I have? Who is willing to put their political capital on the line to influence that ultimate decision maker? Finally, if I can't find somebody who's willing to do that, really the only thing I have left to do is I've got to find out what the various decision makers think through my coach.
Yeah.
So when you have brought things like this to them in the past, what questions do they typically ask? What do you think are going to be their this ultimate decision maker? What do you think is going to be, let's say, the CFO's biggest concern?
Yep.
What are the questions they're going to be? What is their pushback going to be? What is their criticism going to be? And I'm going to try to find out as much as I can. It will always blow my mind. It will never cease to amaze me how often our coach or our champion knows what the ultimate decision maker is going to say when they bring it to them. And unless we directly ask, they don't bother to tell us.
Yeah. Or they don't get conscious of it.
They're not conscious of it.
When you put them on the spot and ask them, then you've got something, then they'll bring it up. But it's like they're not thinking in advance of what their boss is going to ask them. And therefore they're not prepared. And if they're not prepared, the answer is not going to be as good.
Exactly. So if I cannot access the ultimate decision maker, then my options are, can I help my champion predict what they're going to say, make them conscious of it? Well, they're going to say, this is really expensive. Okay. And what will be your response to that?
Yeah.
And if they struggle, I get to help them.
That's right.
Would you like to talk about that? Let's talk about that, right? I can coach them up.
A little bit of a rehearsal.
Exactly. I can rehearse with them.
That's great. And I'll throw this out too. Sometimes I think we get caught up in theory versus reality of we've got to get to the ultimate decision maker. Well, there are people that sign the checks, but that person really, all they do is sign the check.
Right.
It's the decision maker or the person who signs the check is different from the person who they really truly make the decision, but their boss, who's, let's say, going to sign the PO, actually doesn't ask any questions. They're simply a ratifier in the process. They're not really an influencer or a decision maker, although they are the ultimate decision maker.
Right.
So that can happen as well.
Yes.
I've seen situations where, and this doesn't happen often, but I saw a situation where a seller was so determined to get to the person who signed the check, figuratively speaking in this case, that they blew up the relationship with the person between them. And the person between them actually had virtually 100% of the authority to buy from them. They just needed to get someone else to ink the agreement.
Right.
And yet they blew up the person who was going to sponsor them because the salesperson was so determined to get to the the decision maker. Now, that doesn't happen often. I have seen that happen,
and I've also seen that happen because the sales leader was pressuring that salesperson that they had to get to power.
Fair.
So that's a problem for salespeople, but it's also an opportunity for sales leaders to check what's really happening here. And there are other options in this particular scenario. And again, what makes a good salesperson great? I also have other options. Yeah. Part of my plan C might be that I use my bench. I'm going to toss the ball to my boss and have them reach out.
People involved.
Because if I don't want to, I'm too worried about the relationship with my champion or my coach. That might not be beneficial for me to really push too hard and make them feel like I'm stepping on their toes, to your point. So what other options do I have? I can have our technical team reach out to their technical team and find out intel. I can have our leadership reach out to their leadership and find out information that protects. I can't control what my boss does. I don't know about you, right?
I love, he's a loose cannon.
Sorry about that, right?
I love
he got excited that we were talking to you and he made a call, right?
I love shrugging their shoulders.
But those are my options. And a great salesperson knows how to use their options.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
So I think the last thing we need to unpack with this is just simply, how do you learn to be good enough to adapt?
Yeah.
And I got some thoughts on this, but I'll let you go first.
So I think it is learning when we step in it. I think it's learning when we make a mistake. So if I got burned because I didn't do something as well as I thought. Let's say that I had a buyer who was really pushing for pricing, and I got weaselly because I didn't want to give it to him because I felt like it was premature and I didn't know how to handle it. I've got to go back after that call and think about, this is going to happen to me again.
Yeah.
And so I've got to, it is my job to figure out how to handle this sticky point that I just ran into in my sales call. I have to figure that out. Yeah. And chances are really good that there are other people on your team who have already figured that out that you can go talk to. Anything that is either slowing down your sales process or causing roadblocks, we as professional sellers have to come back and look at it and go, how am I either going to get ahead of this next time, or what's going to be my next route, my plan B if I run into it in the moment? And that we have to continue to analyze what we're running into.
And so pre-call planning, getting ready for something ahead of time is a big thing. Experience, debriefing. Mm-hmm. David Sandler told the story of him learning how to do a flight simulator. And what he said, he got the computer and everything set up, and he's got the manual over here, and he's learning how to do this flight simulator, and he jumps in the cockpit under the virtual simulator, and he goes through all this stuff, and he's learning how to take the plane off. The plane's coming up the tarmac, the whole thing.
Yeah.
He said at some point he reached over to the manual to learn how to set the communications so that he could do that, and he looked up in the plane and crashed into a mountain. And he said, this is a lot like a sales call. And he said, if you're trying to follow a manual while you're flying the plane, you're going to crash. Mm-hmm. And his advice, and I thought this was great advice, I've used it in my business as well, and that is before the meeting, look over what you need to do. Prepare, plan, do all the stuff. Pre-call, checklist, all the stuff. And then fly the frickin' plane.
Right.
Run the sales call. Be present with the person.
Yes.
Be in the moment. Have the conversation. And then when you're done, to your point, go back and debrief.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't quantify the value in the buyer's eyes as well as I could. I didn't put a dollar amount on that. Next time I'll do that. Mm-hmm. And then that to me is a great system for learning and having enough experience to be able. One of my clients says, you got to be in enough rooms. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. But you got to your point, learn enough from those rooms such that you can be dynamic when you need to be dynamic.
Right. And that mindset of, I ran into this, I didn't like how that went, I have to go figure it out.
Yeah.
Right?
I got to learn.
Yeah. I got to learn how to handle that next time it comes up.
Yeah. Great discussion. That is theory versus reality in 4 different places. And a lot of fun having the conversation with you. We'll have you back again soon, Emily Jeppes.
Thank you. And go watch Nailed It. You will not be sad about it.
Love it. I love it. I will go see it.
Okay.
So thanks for being on the show.
Yeah. Thank you.